Greetings and welcome to the Semicolon Podcast. My name is Cantave and I am an author, I'm a writer, I'm a journalist, I am also a speaker, I'm also a husband, I'm also a student, and I'm quite a bit of things. But despite all of the different caps or titles I could give myself, the main thing I would say is that I am a man who cares deeply about people and deeply about the world that he lives in. In addition to, I would say probably the professional caps that I wear, I'm more on the personal side. I'm also happily married to a very wonderful and beautiful woman who I love very much and appreciate very much. And in addition to that as well, I am also a Christian. And so that is my faith, the foundation from which I live. But having said all of that, I'd like to welcome you again and say thank you once more for joining me on this new media venture. Some of you have been following me for many years in terms of my work as a writer, as someone who has advocated for, specifically or primarily the teaching of St. Martin history and sharing, information about St. Martin's culture, for my advocacy for youth development, and so many other, facets of my life. Especially recently, having been on radio for almost 2 years and making the decision to, I wouldn't say change, but shift my career as a journalist, where I decided to go back to school and enroll in a pre-law program because yours truly is going to become a lawyer. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to put aside journalism. I do see it as something that helps strengthen the passion and the professionalism and the fight, that I have brought and I bring to media, especially when it comes to investigative journalism. The law is very important, but what makes this so different is that, it's not like I'm doing law in like American law or even international law, but I'm doing law in Dutch. It's basically, I went to an all-English school, which is the Max School in St. Martin Academy. And yes, we learn Dutch. We learn Dutch, while in school as a additional language. But because this island, in essence, at the end of the day, at this part of the island that I live on, which is the southern part of the island, it is a colony of the Netherlands. No matter how you put it, our system, our laws and everything is in Dutch. And I truly believe that if we want to see, a certain level of change, then we need to also have a firm grasp of the system that we live in. Even if it changes in the future, that is a lesson that I would say I took from Nelson Mandela. Not saying that I'm trying to, live exactly like he lived, because he made a great sacrifice in fighting for his country. But that is, of course, required when it comes to any person who decides that they want to put themselves at the forefront to fight or champion something that they're willing to die for or be jailed for, be imprisoned for. But something I learned from Nelson Mandela was that it is important to know your colonizer's language. And the reason why is not just because you are able to speak with him, but then you get to understand how they think. And, I just found it necessary, having visited, for example, the courthouse several times on St. Martin and realizing that there's such a hard divide between, the legal system and the majority of the population. We can either complain about it or do something about it. And I always believe in living on the side of doers. And so that is the reason why I decided to, make such a change in my life. And so again, I want to say welcome and thank you to all of you for joining the Semicolon Podcast. That was quite an introduction. And the main thing that I want to, get out from the get-go is that here at the Semicolon, the main reason why I decided to do this podcast, which will be weekly for now, but will definitely increase to at least twice a week, but for now, once a week. The reason I decided to do this podcast is simply because I realized that there is such a need for us to understand the society around us, to understand the world around us. What are the factors that impact our lives, what decisions are being taken, what decisions are being made, what policies are being put in place that can impact our lives. And in addition to that, so in addition to, let's say, the news part of, what I do, I also want to have real life conversations, about things that many of us go through. Because in essence, with a semicolon, for those of you who know, semicolon is a punctuation mark. So instead of a period that says the story is over, the story has ended, or a comma, which means there's some, let's say there's some stuff I have to add to this sentence, with a semicolon, it's basically where, a punctuation mark that says, I can stop, but I choose to continue. Or the story could have ended, but here's a little more, right? And I believe, especially having committed several years, well, not that many, but a good 2 years at least, to doing investigative journalism here on my island of St. Martin, I realized that, there is definitely a little more than meets the eye if we're willing to dig deep enough, if we're willing to look beyond the veil, if we're willing to ask more questions, if we're willing to knock on some doors, if we're willing to make some phone calls and ask questions, if we're just willing to speak up, we would realize that there's definitely some more. And so with the semicolon, it's all about, giving you the encouragement. So first, giving you the awareness, knowledge, and information about what's happening around you, how it's impacting your life, but also to give you the encouragement and inspiration to continue. To say that, no matter how challenging or difficult the situation may seem, I choose to continue. I believe that there's more, behind possible full stop. And it's no wonder that the semicolon is a punctuation mark as well that is used when it comes to suicide prevention awareness, because there are so many people who feel like, they can't deal with what's happening around them. And as a journalist, I could tell you, sometimes when all you consume is just bad news and news of corruption and darkness and abuse and all these things, it can make you cynical and it can really bog you down. It can depress you. But again, there's so much more to life. And so instead of adding that period, like the City Girls, I think it's best to turn that period into a semicolon to say that there is some more. And with that, one of the main questions that will always be asked, so in essence, the pillar, the foundation of this podcast, is to ask the question, will it continue or will it end? Does the story continue or does it end? And so for today's episode, so the first series, the first show of today, I want to speak on a matter that I believe is extremely crucial if we want to continue to see a difference in our society. And that topic is accountability. Accountability, and one more time, accountability. And the position that I'm going to speak on it from is not one that most of you are used to, where, I start bringing the fire and brimstone to start, at the politicians and the leaders who have, kept this country down and all these kind of, and different stuff like that. But I'm actually bringing all this fire and brimstone, not on the leaders today, not meaning to say that it won't happen later on in the program, because there are some things that has been happening, in my period of silence in the, basically 6 months since I kind of put a pause on my media work. But I have been observing, my eyes have been open, my ears also, been hearing a lot of stuff. But in essence, it's not just about the leaders, because at the end of the day, if I'm not mistaken, our leaders are also a reflection of ourselves. So today, the topic or the fire is coming straight at you. And I'm encouraging you not to pause, not to skip, not to jump, not to shut off your phone, tablet, or whatever. Because while maybe some point in this journey, you may be offended, you may be upset, I guarantee you that as I'm watching this camera, everything that I do truly comes from a place of love, of integrity, and a desire to speak, a desire and a will and commitment to speak the truth, to share correct, right information, but to also give context and perspective on how we can improve not just our personal lives, but the lives of our neighbor, our family, our friends, and the community at large. And so today's episode is titled Check Yourself. And for those of you hip hop fans, and you're probably thinking of the song, check yourself before you wreck yourself. But I don't think we'll be, and I don't want us to head to the point of wrecking ourselves. So it's important that we take a moment, analyze our situation, and check ourselves first before we decide to go and check other people. So to take a quick break from checking ourselves, I want you to first check in and check out Bel Air Beach Hotel. And not just because they're the program's first sponsor, although that is significantly important, but also because they're located, well, number one, they're located in the cozy area of you guessed it, Bel Air Beach. And while there are lots of benefits to speak of and share with you about the hotel, right now there's this amazing special happening for a specific group of heroes in our community, our teachers. That's right. For all educators on the island, no matter whether it's the French side, the Dutch side, the northern side, the southern side, you can book rooms at a special rate of $100 per night when you book for a minimum of 2 nights. And to make it even more fun, the hotel is allowing additional persons to book for an added $25 per night if they're 12 years old and older. So to get more information of this amazing deal and package, you can email Bel Air Beach Hotel at info@belairbeach.com or reservations@belairbeach.com. Alright, so now that we have that amazing info that was shared regarding the Bel Air Beach Hotel, let's get into today's episode. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Accountability. Why it matters, why it's important. Now, before I continue as well, there's something that many persons, have been contacting me about, and have been doing so for months. Because at the end of the day, many of you knew me from, especially being on radio, and persons were wondering, well, were you censored? Were you silenced? Why did you decide to take a break? Besides, of course, making the decision to go back to school. And one main question that I often received, which was, were you threatened? I just want to let it be known straight off the bat that I was threatened in different forms, yes. That did, for a brief moment, put me in a down state. I wouldn't really say depressed, but probably. Probably. But it was for a brief moment. But at the same time, one of the things that I do want to establish, though, is that the same fervor that was exhibited when it came to writing all those investigative stories and whatnot, and speaking about certain issues on air, that will continue. I want to make it absolutely clear, especially now that, well, there's no one above me necessarily besides God. If you have an issue, if you have a complaint or whatever it may be, well, there's now no longer someone that you can go to say, well, I want Ralph to be a little quiet. I don't like what he's saying and so forth. Come to me directly. You don't like what I say? Listen, I'm open to criticism. All threats will be dealt with, in the way they have to be dealt with. I'll say that. But you can no longer just go above my head. Let me put it like that. Come to me directly, because this is part of the reason why I want to get into the topic that I feel is so important, which is accountability, which is because of the fact that there's so much that happens here in St. Martin that we often blame our government for, sometimes, most times rightfully so. We blame our leaders, we blame others, and then, you're wondering, well, where is your role as an individual? Where is your role as a citizen of this country? What responsibilities that do you have, or that you should take up, that that matter? And for me, that is significant, because what has led to us losing a sense of self, which is why we often hear this famous question, who's a St. Martiner? What is St. Martin culture? That's just that type of dialogue is because it's like we have allowed ourselves to be so fearful. We have allowed ourselves to be silent for so long that we allow everything under the sun, and I say we allow everything under the sun to happen on St. Martin that makes us have this, sentiment that, we often say, boy, only on St. Martin this happens. Only on St. Martin people get away with this. Only on St. Martin people do this. But there could have been checks and balances, accountability. There could have been barriers or guidelines, things put in place. There could have been pushback. There could have been a voice. There could have been something that was said at least, to curb the, in a sense, chaos or the confusion, the lack of order in our society. So again, so I felt like I really had to say that because, at the end of the day, until one person, and I'm not singling out myself because there are quite a bit of people who are vocal and speak out and share their opinions, etc. Although there is blowback for doing that, I truly believe that if we want to see real change on this island, then we have to make the decision to change ourselves first. And that means making ourselves uncomfortable, because change is not always rosy. Change is not always beautiful, and the end process of change looks great, but the process in between, sometimes not at all, So let's look at it starting from this point. Again, we tend to have issues, or we complain and voice our frustrations about affairs or things that our government don't do, or just the type of government we have, or the type of parliament that we have. But then let's look at the 50 members of parliament. The fact that, and in addition to, let's say, the 7 ministers, some, you can look through a few of them and realize, okay, some of them don't have no degree, or, may not really be the most educated person or qualified person and so forth. But then we also probably listen to meetings, listen to press briefing, and we wonder, what are we allowing? Like, can this person not, for example, really speak to the people? Why we do have leaders who are so condescending and all these things? But then the question is, who do they represent? They represent me and you, even if you specifically as one individual or a small community, they didn't necessarily put them there. But what it shows is that for a majority of at least the voting population, because at the end of the day, the voting population doesn't represent the entire population of the island, but for the voting population, we tend to see the same old trends. While there may be spikes and shifts and changes, but for the large part, the same trend, the same type of representation, and we asking ourselves, boy, when we gonna get good government? Boy, this government no good. Boy, this is the worst government ever. Possibly so. But what was your role in ensuring that the leaders that we have were people who represented us, or who could at least represent us with quality, with class, with intelligence, with empathy, with care, with dignity? Because if we don't take ourselves seriously, because it seems like we're not, if we don't take ourselves seriously first, our future, this island, is in for a heck of a journey, to be quite honest. It's in for a heck of a journey, because we are now becoming so laissez-faire, and we are actually playing into the hands of political rulers, because part of the way in which they ensure that they maintain power, besides maybe buying a vote or deception or whatever else, is by ensuring that you are so bogged down with life, ensuring that you are so bogged down with all the things happening around you that you don't have enough energy to say, what, this here is wrong and I can't tolerate it. This here is not correct and it should not continue. Because you know why? They always have their base. They always have their base. And their base always supports them. Why? Because then in the nature of that relationship is the purpose of getting into power, of getting into leadership, is to ensure that that base is protected. But then what happened to the rest of society? Something has to change. Yes, our leaders have to change. But if our leaders are a representation of us, then before we start pointing fingers at them or plucking out the spectacle or several from their eyes, let's look at what are the things that we need to first remove from ours. So I want to look at it from a perspective of, let's say, healthcare. We know that St. Martin's healthcare system is in much need of improvement. And I will be doing episodes, more research and so forth to delve into that from various aspects, be it mental health, maternity care, even COVID, lots of different factors, SZV, you name it, health insurance, etc. Our healthcare system is in need of much improvement. We have a hospital that has been taking forever to be built. That's another episode in itself to do a deep dive into why has it really taken so long. So that's just a notice to say I'm back and the investigation is coming soon. But besides that, if we know that, for example, and that our healthcare system is not the best and not the most robust, but still better than what we can find in many areas, what are we doing to at least ensure that as an individual, we make our health a priority? And I started off with healthcare because I have a personal story that I want to share, about that. And it's not to say that because our healthcare system is not great, that we should that basically we have to make sure drink water, like drink 7 bottles of water because we don't have great healthcare. And it's not to make an excuse to say that it's okay or so. No. But the point that I want to make is simply we have a responsibility primarily for ourselves, our family, people that we influence, and starting with ourselves. I had an experience where in 2001 I got pre-diabetic symptoms. At the time, I was not looking like this. Fine man without pimple. That's an inside joke to a few folks. But yeah, I was not looking like this. I was much larger. And I was diagnosed with pre-diabetic symptoms, which was strange, age, how old was I at the time? 25, 26. And it was scary. One of the things that threw me off is that I don't really have a history of, being sick or even sick people in my family. And, I trace back to what led me to be in a position where I had to end up staying 2.5 days in a hospital. So I recognize that it basically, the stem or the root of it, started when I was in college, when I was studying, doing my journalism degree, where basically I ate a lot of junk. I ate a lot of junk. I rarely slept. I didn't sleep well, period. I did not prioritize myself. Even though I would, book a gym membership, I had my gym card, I would gym pass, whatever. Sometimes I would go maximum 3 times a week. I didn't make it a priority. I was bogged down with not just school. For the first 1.5 years of my marriage, it was long distance in a sense. So, we'll fly back and forth, and a lot of things, So one of the ways in which I cope with life situations was that I would just eat the pain away. I would eat to forget about, how I truly feel, to ignore dealing with that root cause, that root issue, which was loneliness, which was depression. Because at the time, you could have never tell me I dealt with depression. You could never tell me that, because for me, a depressed person or someone going through depression is somebody who wears baggy clothes, wears black, always inside, and they kind of, they don't have no life and energy. I was going to school, even though, I wasn't taking care of myself the best, I was still living life, as a college student. But guess what? all of what I went through that period led me to being in a hospital, the same one that's taking quite a while to be built, 2 days and a half. And it was tough, especially in realizing or accepting the fact that I now had to take insulin shots. Thank God. That is that's over with. As you can see, especially if you know me from before, changed my life, drink a lot of water, eat a lot of greens, vegetables, etc. But I share that to say, I remember when I saw the bill, and it blew my mind. When I saw how, basically they charge you for turning on the AC. They charge you for even thinking about calling the nurse. Now, that's an exaggeration. But I mean to say that, listen, you don't want to go in a hospital. You want to be healthy. Because healthcare is expensive. No, I'm not saying that, because of the cost of healthcare, we shouldn't demand excellent healthcare and healthcare services. But I also had to take responsibility for the fact that I would eat a whole box of pizza. I would lick down a Chick-fil-A, not anymore, as much as I used to like it, and listen, we can't even, I know they just call Chick-fil-A Jesus Chicken. Listen, you cannot call Chick-fil-A Jesus Chicken because it's not healthy for you, all right? So if you want to label something, put Jesus' name to something, it gotta be healthy. That's a little side note. Hopefully you laugh, maybe not. Anyhow, the point is that when I saw that bill, right, especially having had to pay for it out of pocket, wasn't insured at the time, it was a rude awakening. It was quite a wake-up call to realize that I need to take accountability for my health. Yes, we do need great healthcare services and healthcare programs, etc. But then what are you doing to ensure that no matter what happens, be it the next pandemic, your body is equipped, is strong enough to withstand, whatever viruses or diseases are going around. The same way, we know that here on the island, we have high STD rates. At what point do people take responsibility for their actions? We can look at it where another angle is that, for example, from a financial position. When we look at, our country's finances, it makes you want to more than cry. It makes you scratch your head. Because you wonder, how is it that as a country like St. Martin, where we, it's like we see the wealth of this land, we see the money being made, and then you ask yourself, where's the money? Honestly, where is our money? When it comes to the roads, education, different facets, you're wondering then if so much money is flowing through this economy. We have so many casinos and all of that, lottery booths and you name it. Money is flowing through this island, and you're asking and you're wondering, well, how is it that so many people are so poor or living beneath the poverty line, or simply living check to check, and hand to mouth and so forth. So I look at it from the point of, indeed, we need to ensure that we hold our leaders accountable for the way in which our finances are being managed. But again, if we recognize that for over 10 years, St. Martin has failed to give proper account for the money that has been accumulated and the income that was received through our taxes and so forth, then it makes you wonder, besides where is our money going, if the people that we select are the ones, if the people that we've elected or that have led us in governments, present or past, that have not really taken it as serious, when it comes to the financial integrity of this island, don't they represent us? Then on a personal level, how are we ensuring that we budget our funds? That, we don't live, that we don't, in a sense, hang our hat too high or live for the Joneses and so forth. And it matters, because the main thing that you realize is that if we don't have checks and balances, if we don't maintain values, if we don't have a code, then we allow anything to happen and we start to distort or change who we want to be, or we fail to achieve what we desire to be. But it will only happen if we are willing to hold ourselves accountable. And so one final note is one where, on St. Martin, again dealing with this issue of fear, people being afraid to speak out because of the backlash, because of being victimized, etc. And that is totally understood. But that has been a culture that has been purposely created, ingrained, to keep us down. And my main point is that it cannot continue. And you know why it's so sad? Is because we, in failing to hold ourselves accountable, primarily, but especially in failing to then, in addition to that, holding our elected officials and holding our leaders accountable. And leaders, not just political leaders, we have business leaders, you have religious leaders, social leaders as well, community leaders as well. So just in general, in failing to hold our leaders accountable, we have allowed so much tabooness to increase, where we are so mum on speaking on things that matter, speaking on things that affect your life. But then guess what happens? You don't speak on it until it affects you directly. And that right there is a problem. Because let's look at the cases of abuse on St. Martin. How many children, to the point of me, this very second, minute, hour of sitting here speaking, may have gone through the hands of abuse or even women and men, just humans in general. At this present moment, going through something, not just going through something, but abuse in particular, whether it's domestic violence and the like, that maybe someone knows, but is silent on. And then we say, well, our leaders are abusing the country, they're taking advantage of the island, they don't respect us and so forth. But listen, in a sense, they feel like you're no better than them. The only difference is that their lives is much more public, than yours. And that their mistakes are more public. And so they're bound to be scrutinized at a much higher level. But guess what? That cannot continue. If we want to have a country where we can say, I'm proud, I am hopeful to raise a family on this island, to see future, to produce future generations, of people to inherit this island and so forth. Because it's sad that, particularly when it comes to children especially, what we hear and that we're all guilty of and that we need to change and start doing something about, that when something happens to somebody, we don't say, boy, had it been my child, boy, if it was my child, I'll be in point blank. If it was my child, the police couldn't hold me back. But your child is not the only child that matters. I am not lying, that is the truth. Your child matters, as well as the other child next to your child, and the child who will come after your child, and the child, who's friends with your child, who's even enemies with your child. There are people, there are children especially, there are women, there are men, there are people in general going through intense forms of abuse, of violence, and of oppression. But then we say nothing because our mentality is, well, it ain't me. As long as it ain't me. But it can no longer be as long as it ain't you. Because when it happens to you, when trouble starts knocking on your door, trust me, you would have wished somebody would say, you know what, sir, or ma'am, whatever, yo, bro, sis, cuss, whatever, I gonna stand with you. I gonna say something. And that's, for example, us men. You see another man harassing a woman, can't be like, well, it ain't my wife, so I ain't got no issue. But bro, say something. Say something. It doesn't mean you have to instigate a fight or whatever, but say something. You see something wrong happening, say something. Say something. I mean, at what point will we get to see the change we desire? We desire it, but we're not willing to step up for it. And the way in which we will see it is when we first change. When we begin to model a way of life that other people can say, well, if this guy or this woman or this lady, whatever, is willing to put her neck on the line, is willing to change her life or change his life or make a difference, then perhaps I can make a difference too. And again, it matters because look at the quality, the type of leaders you have today. Are you satisfied? The same goes for not just citizens or individuals, but especially business leaders. You can't be a business owner talking about, oh yeah, but these politicians, the government ain't, you're doing nothing for us, and you're abusing your workers. You taking advantage of migrants or migrants. What makes you better? You oppress your people? What makes you better? When will you take accountability and recognize that, you know what? I could probably do a better job of being a manager. I could probably do a better job of being a supervisor. Let me be different. Let me hold myself accountable. And so finally, we simply have to do away with that culture or that spirit of fear that holds us back, that keeps us mum and wondering, well, I want to say something, but I don't know how my boss gonna receive it, or I don't know how my neighbor gonna feel, or I don't know how it'll impact my job, or it's gonna affect my business. If everyone on this island is afraid to change, is afraid to hold them, is afraid of accountability because of fear of how well your personal life will be affected, then we are in essence giving away the whole island. It's no exaggeration, because that is what has been happening. That is definitely what has been happening in terms of whether fraudulent or underhanded land deals, the abuse of our island's environment itself, the desecration of our historical sites and so forth. How much more St. Martin used to have about, for example, 19 ponds. Let's say, I think it's like 14 ponds. Now we're down to what? 3, 4, 5? At what point did somebody say, you know what? And not to say people didn't, don't get me wrong. But what point are more of us, instead of saying, boy, look how they're destroying the island's nature, will you take time to contribute, to help clean this island, keep it clean? Not just Small Bay Beach, but the other beaches, the other areas, the other neighborhoods, especially those you don't visit. For the love of country, will you be willing to make that change? To step out of your comfort zone for the sake of a brother, for the sake of a sister. Because we have allowed this country to go a little too far in the disorder, in the chaos almost, that exists. And our future is at risk. And by our future, I don't just mean when we are in our old age, but my children, your children's children, and their children's children's children. It's time that we start thinking not just for ourselves, but for the future. And so in order to do that, we need to get rid of that fear, relinquish that spirit of fear that holds us back, that keeps us as a nation, so pacified, tolerating any and everything, especially when it comes to abuse, in our society. We just, yeah, I know it's bad, but what can I do? Say something at least. So like I said, I first had to come for you before I come for them. Because in essence, part of the reason why they rule, part of the reason why even their generations continue, let's say power, that stronghold or strangle on power and positions and opportunities and so forth in St. Martin, and that you also see this fight, this clash. I don't know if some of you are aware, but there's this clash for power on St. Martin. But it cannot continue, because in doing so, what they do is it starts off with, hey, here's a fridge, Here's a zinc for your roof. Here's an iPhone. Here's some phone cards. Here's a tuition for your son to go into school. Here's a car. Here's this, here's that. Just so that you can be silent and say, well, it could be worse. It's okay. Well, they did help me out some time back. Here's your GB bill paid. Are we going to accept, mediocrity? Because we've done it for quite a while, but it can no longer continue. So the question is, will it end or will it continue? Probably not, but I can guarantee you that there's so much more to the story. Thank you for joining me on the Semicolon podcast. It was a great pleasure. And just as a reminder, you can join every Tuesday at 10 a.m., whether on Facebook or YouTube. And I'm encouraging you to also please like, share, subscribe, because I guarantee you that it's going to be great. There are so many things that we can talk about. And again, I don't want to just talk about news items, while the main thing is to ensure that you receive information and knowledge about what's happening around you and the decisions that affect your life, but also to give you the encouragement to move forward no matter what, because there is no end to this great experience we call life. It always continues. And so please feel free to like and share. And also, if you want to support this venture, feel free to email me at ralphcan24@gmail.com or contact me via WhatsApp or cell at 526-2602, 526-2602 to contribute and also become a sponsor on this wonderful program. There is definitely some space for you to advertise your business and get great exposure with a phenomenal audience. And so I am so appreciative of all of you for taking the time to watch this. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a whole lot of fire. So stay tuned for the next one. God bless you and take care.